A 20-year-old sits at his parents' kitchen table and tells them he wants to enlist. He's been watching the news. He's been watching a lot of it. The war, the footage, the things happening to people while he sits in a large house in New Jersey doing nothing. He says he wants to go do something that matters. You can argue about whether that's a good plan. What you cannot argue is that it's the first time in his life he has wanted anything. His parents are terrified, so they get him a car, a nice one, and a job in film production that a family friend arranges, and an apartment in the city. And he takes it. That's the part that finishes him. He takes the car, and the impulse goes away, and it never comes back. I want to talk about AJ Soprano, because he is the most disliked character in a show full of murderers. And because the reason people hate him is that he's the only one whose failure is happening to somebody in their family right now. Start with the thing almost nobody grants him. He was right. At 15, AJ reads a bit of philosophy at school and comes home with the news that life is meaningless and God is dead. It's played initially as comedy. The dim kid discovering nihilism, mangling it, deploying it to get out of confirmation class. But sit with what he's actually saying, and to whom. He is telling a family that launders its income through a waste management company, that goes to mass, that keeps a priest on retainer for emotional support, that everything they've told him is a lie, and the whole structure is built on nothing. He is completely correct. He has arrived, at 15, by accident and reading, at the exact conclusion the audience reaches over 6 seasons. And the response from the adults in the room is to be embarrassed, tell him to eat, and put him back in confirmation class. That's the first thing to understand about him. He isn't stupid about the world. His perception is fine. What he has never been given is any way to act on what he sees, and perception without agency doesn't produce a rebel. It produces a depressive. Now watch what happens. Every single time he collides with anything, he gets thrown out of school. Another school is found. He and his friends vandalize property and steal from a church, and it is handled. His car burns to a shell in the woods with him standing next to it, and a new one appears. He can't finish at Rutgers. He gets a job, and then another job, and each one dissolves the moment it becomes tedious. He is present for a genuinely vicious assault by his friends, the kind of thing that ends other people's futures, and nothing whatsoever happens to him. Every wall in this boy's life has been made of paper, and someone has always been standing behind it with a check. And here's the thing people get wrong when they call him spoiled. The problem isn't moral softness, it's informational. Think about how anyone actually finds out what they're for. You try things. Most of them don't work. The ones that don't work cost you something real. Money, time, a job, someone's good opinion, and the cost is the signal. It tells you, not this, do it differently. You are not as good at this as you thought, or you're better at that than you knew. A vocation is not a thing you discover by introspection. It's what's left standing after enough failures have knocked down everything else. AJ has never received a single one of those signals. Every failure has been intercepted before it landed, which means he has arrived at 20 with no data about himself at all, no evidence of what he can withstand, no proof he's ever completed anything difficult, nothing he could point to and say, that was me, and it was hard, and I did it anyway. Then everyone in his life asks him what he wants to do, and expresses disappointment when he has no answer. He can't have an answer. Nobody has ever let anything cost him enough to find out. Which brings us to the question his parents cannot resolve, and neither can any family in this position. Is he sick, or is he just like this? Tony flips between the two readings constantly, sometimes in the same conversation. 1 minute, it's a medical situation. The boy needs help. There's something wrong with his brain. The next minute, it's contempt. He's lazy, he's soft, he needs to get off the couch and take a job like a man. And both readings have evidence. Permanently, which is exactly how it works in real houses. Depression in a young man does not present as sadness. It presents as inertia, irritability, sleeping until 2, a mysterious inability to do simple things, and a total absence of interest in anything. And every one of those symptoms is indistinguishable from ordinary self-indulgence, which means the family spends years arbitrating between our son is ill and our son is getting away with it. And they will get it wrong in both directions, and there is no test that settles it. The show refuses to settle it either, and that refusal is honest. He is depressed. He is also, at times, genuinely insufferable. Those are not alternatives. And there's a third element the family can barely look at, which is where it came from. Tony has panic attacks. He inherited a great deal from a mother who was, by any reading, profoundly disordered and completely untreated when AJ collapses with the same symptoms, when the doctors say the words, and the plan they had for him has to be canceled. Tony's reaction is not sympathy, it's horror, because he's looking at his own condition wearing his son's face, and it means the thing he's been trying to outrun has already been handed on. That's 3 generations of the same untreated illness, each one with slightly better vocabulary than the last and not one better outcome. Livia had no name for it. Tony has a diagnosis, a therapist, and medication, and it changes nothing. AJ gets all of that immediately. Plus a family that can afford the best of everything, and he still ends up in the pool. Which I should talk about, carefully. Late in the series, AJ tries to end his life in the family swimming pool. He is found in time by his father, who pulls him out, and the show does something that I think is genuinely important. It refuses to make it dignified. He has not planned it well. It goes wrong on its own terms. The whole thing is clumsy and small and awful. And he ends up wet and sobbing and apologizing on the concrete while his father holds him. There is no cinematic version of it. No note, no music, no moment of terrible clarity. And that's a truer depiction than almost anything else on television. Because the fantasy of the meaningful, well-executed exit is itself part of the illness, and what usually happens instead is muddled and interrupted, and leaves everyone standing around a swimming pool at 4 in the afternoon with no idea what to say. What happens afterward is the part that matters for this essay. He is hospitalized, he is medicated, he is managed, and then, once the crisis has passed, the family does what that family does with everything. They arrange a solution and stop discussing it. Now, before the ending, the one genuinely good thing about him, which nobody counts. At one point, AJ decides he is going to avenge his father. He works himself up. He goes to the facility where the man who shot Tony now sits, demented and harmless, and he cannot do it. He stands there and falls apart and has to be removed, crying. Everyone in his life treats this as further evidence that he's nothing. His father certainly does. And I'd argue it's the single most creditable moment in his entire arc. The boy raised inside that machine, handed the whole inheritance, discovers at the decisive instant that he does not have it in him to hurt a helpless old man. That's not weakness. That's the only thing in the family that got better. And there is not one person in his life equipped to tell him so. Now the objection, which is fair and which most viewers hold. Isn't this all extremely generous? He's a rich kid who won't work. Millions of people have depression and hold down jobs. Millions grow up with far worse and build something. Isn't dressing his laziness up as tragedy exactly the kind of excuse-making that keeps people like him on the couch? There's real force in that. But I'd point at the variable. Take AJ's exact temperament, soft, anxious, unfocused, easily discouraged, and put it in a house where the rent has to be made. He'd be miserable, probably medicated, definitely struggling. He'd also, almost certainly, be employed, because the alternative would be intolerable in a way that his actual alternative never was. Not because hardship is good for people, because the feedback would exist. The kid isn't the variable, the cushioning is. And you don't need criminal money to build it. You just need parents with enough resources and enough fear, which describes an enormous number of families who have never met a gangster in their lives. Which is why the ending is the ending. He doesn't die. He doesn't recover either. What happens to AJ Soprano is that he gets settled like a claim. There's a car. There's an apartment. There's a job in film production that exists because his father knows somebody, doing work he did not earn and cannot lose. And in one of the last things we see of him, he's repeating his father's advice, back to the table. Remember the good times. Focus on the good. It's the family's oldest instruction, the mantra of a house that has never once looked at anything directly, and the boy who at 15 stood in that kitchen and told them all. It was a lie is now saying it out loud, at dinner, agreeably. That's what got him in the end. Not the depression, not the money exactly. The fact that every time he reached for something difficult, the truth about his family, the war, A girl who didn't fit, a purpose of any kind, something more comfortable was placed in his hands, and it always worked. He never had to become anyone, so he didn't.